and the debate rages on, with a voice over that way declaring, what governs man is fear of the truth. And another one over there countering, nay, what governs man is fear of being discovered. And yet a third voice arises proclaiming, no, man is governed as a substitute, a distraction in fact, to keep him from recognizing what's going on. And the debate amongst most rages on. A man said, there are two methods whereby you can attempt to convey information of an extraordinary transcendental nature, either by just telling people outright what you have to say, or by continually piling more and more allegory on top of allegory. And someone hearing this raised their hand and asked, which would you say is the most efficient? And the man replied, are you asking me literally? Then everyone within earshot cheered and applauded as they paired off into couples and began to dance. On some days, this one man would devote most of his attention to trying to bring himself under control. Then on other days, to worrying about handling other people. Then on alternate Saturdays, he had momentarily realized that they were both the same thing, just different views. And he would then sometimes pair off and dance a while with himself. A chap recently paused and pondered, why do we not learn something fresh regarding the proper spatial place for the past in the fact that by automatic reflex we put the dead below ground? In Read Blemishes, one man's story. One man had a bump he'd mash. He called it his mind. Sometimes it oozed when he mashed it, and sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes it'd develop a scab and lay dormant for a while, and sometimes it wouldn't. But no matter what happened, it always eventually come back like it was, an annoying bump. A lad asked his dad, which is worse, hostility or comment? And the elder replied, I beg your pardon. And the kid squealed, I get it. The way most people distinguish between entertainment and instruction is that instruction generally makes them feel guiltier than simply being entertained. Pop quiz time. What do you call a religion without guilt? Closed. But say, Pop, asked the kid, doesn't that apply to all of man's civilized institutions? Yes, it does, my boy. And this lingering sensation of some inadequacy serves as the shoe leather for the collective march of progress. Point. In the midst of the normal parade, a satisfied man is a slacker. For a mystic, lack of alternative is the muscle of his intention. A proverb update from one of our correspondents. The only thing necessary for the triumph of stupidity is for men to be men. He included no return address, in case you wondered. I didn't know it was going to be necessary that I say an update of a proverb that I'm sure everyone will recognize, which I'm glad I didn't. I'd look even more foolish than the guy who wrote us about this. I'm not going to stoop so low or cause you to stoop so low to actually tell you what the original was. I thought everyone would know it. Definition time. Reasons, the mind's attempt at passion. You can always spot an edgy intellectual in the crowd by the sound of their laughter, a certain sound. Not to be confused with a mathematician who has just won the lotto. Democracy. seen as an intellectual allegory. Democracy, a structure whereby every several years the sheep are allowed to select which group of equally stupid shepherds will oppress and misuse them until the next election. You will note, Sir Winston, that moving political matters to the metaphorical level of mental affairs can be most revealing. Pass me that brandy. Trying to show a segue into another paragraph, lest you people keep going, what? A certain father once said to his son, "The stupid constantly fear being taken for stupid." And the lad thought on this for a moment and started to ask if there was some way to protect oneself from such a situation, but suddenly realized the answer on his own. The mayor addressed the townsfolk. Our children are our most valuable natural resource. And someone spoke up, but I thought it was our copper mines and farmlands. Well, yeah, and that too. Human consciousness. A unique example of an operation that is a victim of continual drive-by shootings on a daily basis, yet always returns tomorrow for another go at it. As they passed the theater, one guy said, "Do you have to suspend belief to enjoy a movie?" And another guy answered, "Hell, you got to suspend belief to enjoy life." And now a Maxim update for the masses. Quoting now, "I can forgive all human folly, except that committed by others." After they had arrested his look-alike suspect, the man went down to headquarters to try and help in the identification. They put his near twin in an interrogation room with a one-way mirror, and he stood in silence in the observation room for a long time, watching this eerie reflection of himself as the other one moved and answered questions. Finally, he was joined by the lead detective in the darkened anteroom, and for a while they both stood quietly, attentive to the strange scene playing out before them. And finally the man spoke as he pointed to his near-perfect image of himself in the adjoining room and said, "No, that's definitely not me." Being artsy is no substitute. Being artsy is no substitute for having no talent. Unless, of course, you live in the city. Papa, does a man who resides solely in his civil mind live, so to speak, in the city? Look here, boy, didn't I tell you never to refer to me as related to you whenever we're having a mentally substantial conversation? There are two types of biographies published. In one, men talk about what they've done, and in the other, about what they've thought. A third type would be the autobiography of a mystic, except mystics don't write autobiographies. A viewer writes, "It strikes me that you've said something similar to this on several different occasions in several different ways. But since I continue to see books purporting to track the lives of our great transcendental thinkers, I now wonder if you are actually talking about the world of publishing or some less public realm." One of civilization's responsibilities is to protect its citizens collectively from violence. A man, independently conscious, must do this for himself, and in the main, protect himself mentally from himself. One of the things men do is think about things so that they won't so bluntly have to face them. And a certain man asked himself, if not his mind, how come I can hear things like that just said and even grasp their significance and yet can't do anything about it? How come? Finding: there are many aspects of being human which do not readily lend themselves to easy explanations. Can you say all of them? Or can you see through the entire facade and not be bothered with such questions? Definition: sincere political rebels, would-be mystics, still without a clue. Well, not much of one. Since two people can like and dislike the same thing, it is obvious that what pleases one and what annoys one has the same source, and it is only the mind that gives the distinction. Furthermore, attaching significance to something increases its energy, and comment always adds such a sense of significance. Ergo, for the few, the only good comment is a non-extant one. Those who do not understand that civilization is just another form of jungle warfare will never understand what civilization and human evolution are about. Okay, the encouraging view. At least the mystically inclined have one advantage, in that while everyone else has multiple problems, they have only one. And some of the more alert of those so inclined said, yeah, thanks a bunch. Of course, they're just joshing you. They're actually doubled up delighted with their situation. Well, being as how they're sharp enough to realize there's nothing they can do to change it anyway. Except, of course, see that it successfully runs its course. Being of routine consciousness forces one to be a pessimist. After years of studying maps and pondering various schemes of attack, the warrior's son was still unclear not only as to the ultimate goal, but the immediate methods as well. And his father, recognizing this, walked him just outside camp, put his arm around his shoulder and said to him, telling the tongue to be still is one thing, reminding the mind is another. But getting to the beast to persuade him of this is something so altogether different as to elude all attempts to directly describe it one person to another. It is, in fact, so out of the ordinary as to challenge the capacity of inter-systemic communications within one individual. Useful at-home info. Herd and farm animals will not become unduly frightened as long as they stay together. Useful in the field info. Faux revolutionists still work within the system they oppose, while the true neural kind so far transcend any interest in reform as to normally be off the radar screen of local civilian awareness. As he felt his eyes go cloudy and began for the third lifetime to shed his skin, this one snake of a mystical warrior's son submitted to himself a mental urine test which he insisted must be returned no later than 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Rhetorical moral. Is this why real mystics don't deal in reincarnation? Yes, because they ain't got time for that shit. An updating in academia. A definition. History revisionist, a contemporary historian. Don't bother banging on the door, sir. I already told you that the system is closed. And now today's final say regarding the kinds of conventional words of wisdom by which ordinary men accept they should measure themselves. Proverbs that berate and belittle man suck. If words weren't metaphors, science wouldn't be possible. The mystery of the mystical is in not understanding it. And the debate rages on. From last time, I'd like to pick up two things, wrap one, and do a little something with another one. I was mentioning, if you recall, about man, once he has an intellect that is functioning, that he then goes upon a course without any choice of a continuing attempt, continuing efforts to bring the environment under control, seeking control, and then pointing out that ultimately, eventually, soon, quickly, it doesn't matter, it's according to how fast you can see. It happened right after Adam and Eve left the garden, and it happened perhaps just this afternoon to you. Or perhaps it happened to you shortly after they left the garden, and it's happening now to the northern part of Lapland this afternoon. You understand that? There are time zones everywhere, and they shift continually. But the desire for control ultimately becomes the desire to want to bring the intellect under control, which is what all mysticism is, it's what all human progress is, it is what all dreams of progress are about, is to bring the intellect itself under control, and I pointed out that it cannot be done. That is the one thing that cannot be brought under its own control. And part of that, I was sort of in passing, mentioned the claims of increase in urban crime. And I point out that that was could be seen in part as being a reaction to the almost sense of an unspecified ennui of men now not having to daily. And since this is going out on tape, to make sure that some people that may not have heard my terms before, by urban I'm referring to civilization itself. I'm not referring to any physical, spatial area. That it has to do with, at any particular time and place, whether the people involved that we might be referring to are civilized enough, are up to such a level that their primary interest in life, their primary necessity now, their primary field of endeavor and their attainment is intellectual as opposed to physical. They're no longer struggling for a bare bones existence. So I wanted to expand it just a little and make sure that even you people grasp what I was pointing out. What is being said is that this is the claims amongst the ordinary, and it is now accepted as conventional, obvious wisdom, so it is, that we are undergoing presently, here in 1994, in the civilized world, undergoing some sort of resurgence in crime. Not just urban crime physically, not just as far as a inner city. It has to do with civilization itself, and the reason it's being pointed out, the reason the claim takes on what appears to be of some singular weight is what they're actually saying is, there's a shaking of the head going along with it, you understand. Not just having to do with the crime, but what they're actually saying is that the more civilized man becomes, without any doubt, the less crime there should be. That it seems to be that would be, well, it is, that would be part of the, at least working definition of being civilized. And yet they're pointing out that the greater the civilized areas, crime seems to be rising faster there than in uncivilized areas. And so part of the reason that it is now taking on some significance is the fact that this is dumbfounding to them. Even if no one is actually putting those words out, that is exactly what they're saying. That now the crime rate is rising faster, let's say in the United States, than it is in New Guinea. In places that are less civilized, places with a lower gross national product, lower per capita income. And so the places that are most civilized, and for a while it is true, and I don't mean just the United States, but it's always been true that you could plot a kind of curve that crime begins to go down as the people begin to flourish. If you had a kind of political market economy or a socialist or just political view of economics being tied, which is to say the environment is running man, that nice story, that the more that the people are flourishing, the less reason there is for crime. That just seems to be obvious to all intelligent people. Pardon me. That they simply point out, well, all you got to do if we all start, if our income increases and collectively we become richer, then there's no need to steal. It seems self-evident. And for a while, the self-evidency seems to reflect itself in reality. That it seems to be, well, crime goes down. Civilization goes up, crime goes down. Civilization goes up normally also carries with it economic rewards, as they would put it. The way I put it to you is there's less of a daily challenge for control over the environment. That there is less a daily challenge that you do not know physically whether you will survive the day or not because of need for food, to escape being attacked by your neighbors over your food, or being attacked by other animals, if man was that savory to other carnivores. I notice nobody ever likes to think about that when they think how great man is. And he's such a big old tasty morsel, and no other carnivore goes after him. Oh well. I'm sure there is no metaphysical or metaphorical significance there. And even if there is, I'm sure we don't want to think about it. What they are saying, and I'm not trying to say that civilization collectively in some way is misled, because enough of you have already nodded as soon as I put it in those terms, you understand what is being pointed toward. That it would seem to be beyond dispute that the more civilized we become, the less crime there will be. And as I said for a while, it would match. You could plot it, civilization goes up and crime goes down. And now we're reaching a place, not just the United States, but all over the civilized world, crime is going up. And people go, what? I'm pointing out, there is a kind of boredom. There's a lack of challenge to daily stay alive. Because now in most of the civilized world, you do not have to, all you got to do is have just barely walking around sense. And you don't have to work anymore. You especially don't have to worry that you're going to starve to death. You just don't. And so there's very little challenge. And I was pointing out that in one sense, a kind of regression, that there are people out, shouldn't be a great secret, and I'm sure some psychologist somewhere has already opined such and was ignored, as he should have been. But they point out that, well, hey, we've got kids over here from upper middle class or upper class families engaged in petty crime, thrill seeking, I guess is what they would probably dismiss it as. It's just something to do. It is far more far-ranging than that, because if you get past the point of actual physical crime, that is, of actual mugging or holding up a 7-Eleven store, then you can consider the kind of crime that men are doing to themselves, in a sense, from our view, from a potential view, to yourself mentally by pursuing intellectual muggings, intellectual cheap thrills such as ordinary entertainment. Well, at least in taking it to be more than it is, because if you were attempting to expand your own consciousness and you thought that you were getting something out of going to a movie or watching television or anything ordinarily available, once you understand that this is not an attack on it, but once you understand that from now, outside of an ordinary view, you would realize that that is the kind, in a sense, of damage, the kind of crime that men are perpetrating on themselves now, collectively, is not just turning on themselves and holding up one another now that they're civilized, and stealing from their neighbors, their best friends, mugging their own people in their own neighborhood, is that in a sense, the more civilized they become, if they do not have some form of extraordinary nourishment to do up here, some form of distraction, they will begin to turn on themselves. Do you follow? I'll repeat one more time. It would seem to belie any sense of reason, any sense of expectation, that the more civilized we become, the safer we become to one another. It's an operational definition. A more civilized man is a kind of man that is not going to steal from you, is not going to kill you. He would be the kind, if he were hungry for some reason in his family, he would come and ask you to share, ask you to extend him credit. But that would be one of the operational definitions of a civilized man, is he would not perpetrate crime. He would not be a criminal. And yet, it is they're claiming all over the world, and I'm not denying it, that the more civilized, after a certain point, that areas become, and they say that we're in the midst of it now. Most of the Western world, crime is increasing, and we're richer than ever. Life is easier than ever. What gives? Say they, scratching their head and thinking, what new book can I get out of this? How will I prop up my baloney reputation even more with this kind of observation? That should be simple enough to see, what I've just pointed out. But then to take it to a level that could be useful to you, that's simply a cruder reflection, a physical reflection of what is taking place as man becomes more civilized. In the ordinary sense, none of us in the world, in the Western world, the civilized world, there's less and less likelihood, or less and less challenge of physically, from the level of consciousness down, at the survival level, there's less and less of a challenge, to say the least. There's just no challenge. You can do nothing almost the rest of your life, and you can still live. No challenge whatsoever. The only challenge would be some sort of criminal activity. Challenge would be, how can I get my name, how can I get listed and get food stamps or get unemployment under 2 different names, unemployment insurance, that kind of thing. That'd be the challenge, even if you didn't need it. But there is no real challenge from the level of consciousness, from that level down, to staying alive. From here up, there has never been much of a challenge to ordinary people. Not that it's not possible, but life does not demand that you find a challenge. But now it's almost beginning that these 2 lines are beginning to converge in a certain way, and there they are, people are civilized. Fairly literate, they can go to movies, they can afford to go to movies, even off food stamps, they can afford to get drunk, they can afford to go to clubs, life is no challenge. And it's almost no challenge here. And it's nothing brand new. It's not just some malaise singular to our part of the world or our particular time, but it's now reached the point. This has been going on for a while. And it's like almost everyone is tired of television. How many times can you, I hate to even ask this, how many times can you hear the same jokes or the same situation comedies, the same detective shows? And they're the same thing. They change the name, which is not to attack television, because all they're doing is rewriting history and changing the names, and history keeps doing the same thing. But it's like, well, there's nothing to do. There's no challenge physically to stay alive. And there's almost, not just a challenge, not just that, but almost no semblance of positive nourishment intellectually. The people just can't seem to get attracted. So it is natural that crime go up. But I want you to understand that that's what I meant, is that civilization, that you want to reach a certain point collectively, and the more civilized a place is, contrary to expecting, as you should, as ordinary minds should, that there'll be less crime, it starts to pick up. But I was giving you a nice, simple, direct, in-your-face answer to it. Boredom. Lack of challenge. But then see that it's also here. I also wanted to wrap up what we were talking about, in one sense verbally, the matter of trying to bring the mind under control. And about where we left off, I was pointing out last time that it can never be done. The mind cannot bring itself under control, but you can see that being a fair description of the ultimate goal, the unspecified goal of civilization, of the development of the human nervous system, of all religion, of all mysticism, and yet it cannot be done. And of education, and the arts, of everything, is to bring the mind under control. That's what it is. If you could actually be a Christian, a Jew, a good human, a decent person, a truly civilized man, then what it would be is that you had brought your mind under control. But when we say you bring your mind under control, remember this, it is not some spiritual gift, it is certainly not physical strength. What we're saying is the mind bring itself under control. And I have pointed out to you, I'm not going through that math last time. You recall how long it took me to do that equation. It cannot be done. I mean, it's that simple. What you have is the mind. What another way to see is its unique glory, its singular wondrousness, is the fact that it is forever a piece of unfinished business. I mean, how much more glorious can that be once you understand it? There is nothing else like that on this planet. There's nothing like that within a three-dimensional closed system. Because anything else that was unfinished is deadly. What if you could not eat? If we go below the level of consciousness and talk just about the survival level, the bio-survival, if you could not eat at any particular time, that you could never eat finish off being hungry, you're done for. If you could never get enough sleep, you're finished. The mind is the only thing that properly, not only properly, it is a healthy sign. It is a positive sign. It is the only thing that is a continuing piece of unfinished business. There are other pieces of unfinished business on this planet, but they're only momentarily unfinished. That is, somebody's hungry and they don't get their hunger finished. You can say, well, right then, is that guy starving? He goes, yeah, I'm starving. You go, well, there's a piece of unfinished business. And I say, yeah, you're right, but now come back and check in about 2 weeks. And if he doesn't get it finished, then he is not a continuing piece of unfinished business. He's a temporary piece because he will be, what do you call it? Dead. The mind's the only thing that continues to thrive on the basis that it is forever unfinished. So that is what man is after. But now I'm going to tell you the part I didn't actually put in words to do a wrap-up last time. What men are actually longing for, without being able to put it into words, is what they're longing for is a consciousness freed from comment, which I'd already given away the punchline some nights ago, but that is what it is. That is the purpose of all religion, that's the purpose of all the arts, that's the purpose certainly of all mysticism, except mystics, as they've been generally called, are really the only ones directly working on the problem. Directly working on it. No one else is. It's not because this is some exclusive club. It's not because, they can if they want to. Who's going to stop them? I mean, we got some pretty nutty laws all over the world. That you can't, have sex with a red-headed woman on a Thursday if you're a Lithuanian or something. I assume you've all heard those weird, you can't buy soda crackers on George Washington's birthday or some crap. But there's never been one law anywhere on this planet at any time that says you cannot attempt to be a mystic. None. Nobody even thought about it. So to think it's some exclusive club, which would be small-time, drugstore, weekend, urban cowboy mystics, that is faux mystics, they love to think what an exclusive club it is. Many of them write me fan letters that, as I've said, that they keep getting the idea that I'm in some way trying to, they always put in quotation marks, or else they underline it, or they switch from a green crayon to a big red one, saying you're attempting to debunk. But think about that. They use it. Now, I understand it. I'm not just laughing at it, because I could have told them before they ever wrote me that people would start doing that. But they say you're attempting to debunk mysticism, and they don't even realize what they're saying themselves. If they had any understanding, they would know that you can't debunk, something that's real. You understand? They're saying, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to start that crap again about the emperor's clothes just because I'm naked. Except they can't carry it that far. They can only get halfway through that sentence. You're trying to debunk everybody else's imagination. That's what it amounts to. Yeah. Any sane person on this planet is actually attempting to be more conscious. They're attempting to, you can pick out any term throughout the last 3,000 or 4,000 years of recorded history from east to west on this planet, they're attempting to awaken their consciousness. They're attempting to awaken the creative spirit, the kundalini, the Buddhahood. They're attempting to become one with the Father. I'm trying to extract something from every religion. They're attempting to do all of that. That's what any sane person is attempting to do. It is certainly, with most people, I think we can admit this, although that's everyone's desire, most people have it readily under control. I mean, the amount of enthusiasm they had for this task is that they have it in hand. I mean, but it's not because of an exclusive club. They could if they wanted to. But see, that's the point. I don't know what to say about having to take that long for subtle humor to become unsubtle. In a sense, everyone on this planet, any sane person, is attempting to be more conscious. That is their desire. And it comes out in the simplest of ways. But all it does is reflect not on them personally, and it does not reflect that actually people involved with mystical and secret traditions are an exclusive club, because they're not. As I point out, anybody can do it if they want to, or they can try to. But who wants to? People get what they need. People pursue what they need. And as I have pointed out, I know it perhaps sounds strange the first time you hear it, but people drinking are the same as people going to church once a week or whatever they do. All of that is an attempt to alter their consciousness for the good. People do not drink. Ordinary people, I'm not talking, ordinary people do not drink. They do not take recreational drugs. They do not meditate. They do not light candles. They do not play with rosaries or worry beads. They do not do any of those things to harm themselves. Now, I know, we all know that booze is a poison. Alcohol is physically a poison. All drugs are, in a sense, a poison. But people, ordinary people that do it on a, you might say, recreational basis, all the way, including those who believe they are attempting to do it for some metaphysical basis. They do not do it to harm themselves. They do not, I know people do not go down to bars and order their first beer of the day thinking, well, this will certainly bring me closer to Buddhahood. Or, I know they do not, but they feel as though that is going to have a positive effect. I just wanted to pick out extremes because ordinarily religious people would find that, most of them, to be far removed from their attempts to go into a nice place of worship whenever they do and do something that seems to be of a ritualistic quality and roll their eyes toward heaven, whereas if you're in a bar drinking, you just end up rolling your eyes. If you are sane on this planet in some way, if you're sane and you stay sane for your 60 or 70 years, your general attempt has been to be a better person, which is you have attempted to expand your consciousness. You have. No matter how feebly, that once a year at Christmas or Hanukkah or sometime you go, or at the times if you're a Muslim, you go and you give something to the poor. You help someone. You pray for world peace. Once a year you refrain from cursing someone on the freeway that pulls in front of you. Whatever it is, in some small way, if you are sane, looking at your life of 70 years, if you die and you're laying there and you did not kill anyone, you did not beat up your wife, you didn't, anyone can point out it was that your life in toto was had a negative impact on civilization and life, then you did attempt to awaken. You did attempt to expand your nervous system. You did attempt in some way to be more conscious. Of course, I'm saying attempt, remember, on the basis you can be in the middle of that kind of parade and make no effort. But at least you did not have a negative effect on the parade. You can just stand there and life is really not much of a challenge. I'm doing all this one more time to point out that what people normally think of and dream of and love to read those books about outer space and mystical traditions and secret work, I fully understand the intrigue of it. But it's fiction. It might as well be, it's almost pulp fiction once you see it. It is misleading after a certain fashion. With the ordinary it's not. The ordinary never get past usually denouncing it. But those of you who can follow what I've also pointed out, that there are two types of history and everything, but specifically back to religion, using that as an example. That what any of the Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Muslims know about Buddha, Christ, Abraham, Moses, Muhammad, what they know about him is just gossip. It is not the history. There was no such person as now described. But that doesn't mean anything. That is not a criticism of the religions, because now the history of it serves a purpose in the same way, even though people would want to argue that, especially those with any religious inclination, and yet if they had any academic, ordinary sense of history, they will freely admit, just from what they've read and other people's opinions, that wait a minute, you can't rely on history. It gets all confused. There's been attempted one-liners to explain history, that you can't trust history because it's written by the victors. Well, you first got to know history is what? It's a history of warfare. That's all history is. That's the only thing written down. You don't have histories about people sitting around talking about what, how much I enjoy you and what friends we are. History is the history of warfare, of crime. That's what it is, which I had to do. And then the next one is, oh, well, plus you can't trust history because who writes it? Not the Muggy, the Margora writes it. The defeated do not write history. They may try, but it's not going to go anywhere. So the point being, even religious people, in the ordinary sense, would admit that you can't trust history, but then they would absolutely deny, which they are supposed to, that you got to doubt the history of religion, of their religion. That's not doubt it. I'm just telling you, you can rest assured there is no such person as described in their history as the Muhammad and Abraham and Jesus and etc. And yet it does not matter, because now it is its own history. It is as real, it is as valid to them as I'm telling you that it's not. But if that's all they need, there's nothing wrong. That is all they get. But now I want you to understand also that within every religion, if you took it, those who are now religious, right now and at any time in the past, but right now what is normally referred to as the mainstream, middle of the road foundations of their religion, whoever it doesn't matter. If you tried to speak to them about a mystical aspect of their religion, if you tried to speak to Christians of whatever stripe right now about the apparent past mystical bent of the St. Francis's or Augustine's or Thomas Aquinas, or if you tried to talk to middle-of-the-road Jews about some of the ones that probably no one knows their name, but the mystical, the Kabbalists of throughout history, or if you tried to speak to mainstream Muslims about Sufis and insinuate that there was really something beyond, I know it's now become of somewhat common parlance verbally, but anyway, if you tried to speak to them about a mystical side, religion, the mainstream, the sane religious people of this world at any time, they have to deny that. They have to denounce it. If you don't like deny, they have to discount it. No. They may have been people like that, and they may have meant well, and some of them might even want to pull our trick on us and say, well, that must be some sort of metaphor. Because the more you are ordinary, sane, assuming that's not contradictory to being religious, of course, that the mystical is beyond man. That what an ordinary religious person, Christian or whatever, they would say, nah, religion, that's some sort of dream. That's taking it too far. All we can do is worship God. All we can do is try our best. We can plead for help. In other words, the way that you know you're a sane Christian is to admit that, well, nobody can be a Christian. And I've already pointed out that anybody can be a Christian. It's not that complex. All you got to do is be more alert. Shape up. Snap out of it. That's all it takes. All right, be more conscious. Or if that's too strong, be more alert. That's all you got to do. But the ordinary that are religious would say no. That mysticism, as soon as any religion starts, very shortly, as soon as they can afford to move into a nice building in a good part of town, that's one of the first things they do is denounce that which appeared to be a little too strange and a little too weird in their background, which all of them had strangeness and weirdness in their background, because it was originally a kind of revolt against whatever was going on, which is what those kind of stories in all religions of Jesus and money changers and Abraham and breaking up the idols, that and Muhammad doing the same, that's what that all represents. That it was at the time a kind of revolution. Except all that they remember is a kind that apparently is an external, even political revolution, and it wasn't. It was the revolution inside of one man, that an Abraham, not the one you read about, but the real one, upon whom the story was based. He broke up the idols in his head. He broke up the idols of his thinking, and he abandoned them, and he moved on to another level. But all that's remembered is at a physical level, and therefore, as soon as they become respectable at all, for it to become mainstream, for it to become part of the general evolutionary process of civilization, those involved must deny, discount the mystical. That is, that there is nothing available other than what we have here at the church. That a good Catholic, to go back, just pick out any, must deny that you can actually in some way understand God. That, in other words, you can't do any more than a Catholic does. That is the height of being a Christian. Regardless of the fact, if you ask point blank, well, all right, what do it take to be a Christian? They tell you whatever. Love your neighbors yourself. You say, okay, can you do that? They'll go, well, certainly not. And you go, well, can anybody? Well, no. Well, how about the head of your church? Well, no. Certainly not. Nobody can do that. So if you insinuate by the mystical now, you understand what I'm referring to, whatever they called it. But if you said, do you know that there are books around? Maybe you haven't read enough, but there are people who claim that you can be like Jesus, to stay with Christianity for a minute, that you could actually be a Christian, and it is like a whole other state. And they go, yeah, it's after you die, and whatever their particular story is. And you go, no. Do you know that there are people who have said that the people who've gone out and tried to do I don't know, I'm not sure, but I keep hearing that there are kind of secret schools around, and that there are rumors that there are people that actually did whatever it was that Jesus did. That he actually, they understood there was not after death. You do know by now. In the mainstream of all religions, Christianity and all others, they would go, nah. And they would begin to look strangely at you. Because the story has to be, nah, there wasn't but one Jesus. There wasn't but one Muhammad. There wasn't but one Buddha. Now, we can't do that. All we can do is aspire to. All we can do is swear our allegiance to. But we cannot do it. That is the denial that I'm trying to get you to see, whether they would put it in those terms of denying mysticism, but they deny that you can do any better. A Christian denies that you can do any better than be a Christian. A Jew denies that you can do any more in life than be a Jew. That's it. I mean, if there's something better, they would do it, right? You go, okay, are you one? Well, no. But if you said, what? Would you understand that I've heard stories, we're talking to Muslim men. I understood stories that, all that stuff about Muhammad going off in a cave and hearing voices and, riding up into heavens, that had to do with his own consciousness. And that the idea of being able to return to the union, or if you were talking to Hindus, to go back and reunite with the original Godhead, the original source of creation, that the people who wrote about that originally, the stuff that strikes you now is so astounding and so inspiring. Yeah. I hear tales. There's tales around that say that those guys meant that literally, that they were actually doing that, and are still doing it. You do understand, any sane person of any religious bent, a Muslim would say, no, you are now in the area of blasphemy. And they will find somewhere in their scripture where, and I won't try to come up with it, but they will point out that only God is great. There is but one God, and He's Allah. And they'll say, that shows it. You can't do it. There was but one, the last prophet, the seal of all the great prophets from Allah was Muhammad. He was the last. So what are you talking about? You're saying you're trying to put yourself on the level of Muhammad or of Allah Himself. They have to deny it. It is the heart of it. They can't deny it. I mean, sure they can, but what I'm saying is mysticism is not that weird, the mystical. The only thing that makes it a mystery, if I may quote myself, well, see, I'm in public domain and I don't have to pay royalties. Page 25 of tonight's item said that the mystery of mysticism is in not understanding it. But even those pursuing it have always thought of mysticism and all the great traditions, whatever they call it, all the great secret work, as being so far removed, and especially so exclusive, such a discrete quantum, but a discrete break with everything else. And it's not. It's just the real version of everything else. It's a stronger version. But to say, well, boy, it's far removed, or it's why for so long I've tried to sort of make fun or get you looking a certain way at the idea that it's hidden somewhere, or that may not be around anymore. Where the hell is it going? No. Yeah, but the great ones that I read about that inspire me, listen to it. Yeah, but the ones I read about that were so inspiring are gone. How often do you hear that amongst serious mystics? Not ordinary people now. We're not talking about just walking around Baptists and Jews and stuff. We're talking about would-be mystics. And they go, yeah, I can hear most of what you're saying. Guy caught me. Why is it always a Kroger store where they catch me? I started to say he caught me by the kumquats, but I don't play that shit. Is it the serious mystics, the would-be serious mystics? They go, I hear all that stuff you're saying, but I'm going to tell you what, there's something lacking. There is something lacking because the great epochs, the great eras of mysticism are gone. And they'll use the same, they'll say, where's the Buddhas of today? Where's the Confucius? Where is a Zoroaster? Where is a Jesus even? Where are they? Where? Of course, if they were an actual mystic, I would go, listen. And they'd listen for a minute and say, well, all I hear is fresh produce. And I say, no. I'm not talking about that. Listen to what was just said. And they listen to what they just said, which is simply another version of religion. That is, it's impossible. We can no longer do it. As long as you believe, well, hey, Buddha's dead and gone. He was the last. Or if you're a Muslim, speaking allegorically, one of their tenets is that Muhammad was the last of the prophets. That Allah sent many great prophets, and they'll give credit to the rest of them, which was a nice little stroke. You know. They'll include Jesus and Abraham and Confucius and everybody, and they say, but God finally said, Allah said, and that's enough. Here's Muhammad. He got the final word, so let's cut out all this fooling around. This is it. They would say that. And those not even, remember, I'm not talking about just religious people. I'm talking about now those who consider themselves sincere would-be mystics and seekers of the great secret traditions. They say, besides all that religious stuff, the actual mystical, the great secret work is gone. I mean, it's just not like it was. Buddha's gone. There's no Buddha here to replace him. There's no Jesus here, whatever it was. Are you listening? Not to me. I'm doing theatrics now. To that person, I'm saying, are you listening to yourself? And they're the same ones who will denounce religion as being simplistic, as being far removed, as being out of touch. Like, well, they don't understand. Religion's not dead. If there was any truth to what their founder of their religion said, it's still true today. So never mind them. But I'm more interested in mystical stuff. Are you listening? It didn't go anywhere. For the simple-minded, for those playing around the edges, it does. I want you to know that I realize that it sounds almost like a deflating or an attempted debunking of some kind, or trying to get people to, get over that. It's not to get over wanting to be more conscious. It's to get over wasting your time. It's to get over thinking about it. And then people go, wait a minute. Well, in what way do you mean that? Man Tonight, page, I'll say 15 since you can't check it, and I don't remember, addressed the crowd and said, there are two ways that you can attempt to convey some extraordinary, transcendental, mystical information, either by just telling people point blank what it is you have to say, or piling more and more and more allegory on top of allegory. And somebody raises their hand and says, well, which would you say is the most efficient? Which would be the most? And he says, you remember, he said, are you asking me literally? And many in the crowd got up while they were applauding and cheering. Many of them got up and paired off and began to dance. Do I have to do allegories of my own allegories? No. They cheered and applauded and then got up, and some of them paired off and began to dance. There's an inference I will draw for you in that they cheered and applauded and then paired up and began to dance, and there's no comment in there about them talking anymore. At least during that scene, hey, just noise, hey. Then they got up and paired off and danced. To be conscious without comment, would you buy this? To be conscious without comment puts a serious crimp in any judgment you have over whether the mystical still exists or not. And what it might be, what it might look like. It would, well, I'm glad at least we reached some common ground here of understanding right to tell that some of you evidently would buy into that story. It would put possibly a serious crimp on such comments, on such observations, on such thinking. And then what would a man be left with? Well, I guess he could snap out of it and get out pen and paper and write me another letter and complain about that too. And go, now you've gone too far. Now you've almost debunked and took the fun out of my accusation, taking the fun out. And see, they still won't listen, because every time that kind of accusation is leveled, If any justice prevailed, they'd pay me twice as much. The bill would double. Okay. Roll the credits. Put on the theme song. Flash the address for the solicitation for money and contributions. And don't send any more canned hams. Okay? Cash money or nothing. Don't send me any money, damn it, Jesus. Now, I've been aiming to say something about that because I'm going broke, having to pay the postage to send it back to you people. I can't afford this. That was a metaphor.